Alright guys, welcome back to this video. I talked about this video when talking about the new leaks. We are getting the Mulcharmies. If you're not aware, go check that out. It's in the top right corner of the video where I talk about the leaks. But today we want to go a bit more in depth on concerning what this means. By the way, it seems to be the case that we don't get the Nialos, but we don't know that right now. Anyway, it's also not that important since this is definitely the worst of them, question mark. It is probably the worst of them. I could also argue that Purulia is the worst of them. I don't really know, but yeah, we are getting the Mulcharmies here. Firstly, the Purulia, and then also the Fuvolos, the Purulia being the one that gives you a draw when when something is summoned from the hand, normal or special summoned, and the Fuvolos gives you a draw when special summoned from the extra deck or the deck. So this is what we are getting in Master Duel in January, and of course this had prompted a lot of discussion on the Master Duel Reddit, for example, on what that means. And one of the comments that I read the most is, okay, I will quit the game since Tenpai can now play triple Fuvolos and then triple Purulia as well as triple Maxx C, and this is very toxic. And this is exactly what I want to take a look at today. So firstly, what is happening with this card in, for example, the OCG? And I just went here over to Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta, typed in last 3 months, and then OCG, and you can see right here, this is the symbol indicating that there is a Fuvolos in here, and there's also a symbol for the Purulia, I think, further down the line. But you can see right here that basically any deck is playing the Fuvolos in the main deck. We can also quickly go check them out of playing the Fuvolos in the main or side deck. You can see the Fuvolos being in the main here, and then the Purulia being in the side deck here. Since, and this is the most important thing to understand when talking about these cards, they can only be activated when you control no cards. If you control no cards, that means you can't go first turn, build an entire board, and then drop like a Maxx C on your opponent like a Fuvolos. This does not work. This only works if you go second, which obviously makes this a no-brainer for Tenpai. This is for sure the case. They definitely want to play at least the Fuvolos triple times in the extra deck since they want to go second, and then they can always use this to basically force the opponent to turn skip. I think the Temper will also play the Purulia triple times in the main deck, and obviously this is a problem. I don't want to make it sound better than it is. I think this is a problem, but I think that Konami will also probably address this. Another important point is asking the question whether we will see something happening to Maxx C now on the ban list, and this is something we will talk about in a second here. But firstly, yeah, if everything stays the same, if we don't get or don't receive a big Tenpai hit and the Fiendsmith stuff does not come out, in addition to the Fuvolos cards, then we will have probably a month until the release of the Fiendsmith cards and more hits to Tenpai on the list of really, really bad gameplay in Master Duel. This is something that could definitely happen because Tenpai is the most dominant force right now, and they will definitely go ahead and put the Purulia in 3 times, and then also the Fuvolos in 3 times, and then it is really, really bad. We can also check this out right here. You can click Tenpai Dragon here, and you can see in the OCG we are playing the Fuvolos in basically every deck. You can also click here. There's the Purulia triple times in the main. There's the Fuvolos triple times in the main. This is something that not a lot of decks are doing, putting the Purulia in the main deck, since it doesn't really make sense. It's also not that great. It's a meta-dependent card, but Fuvolos in the main deck you can definitely argue for. You will have a bad time when you are going first and then you open this card, but you might be able to discard it for something, for the effect of something like Forbidden Droplet. So in many decks it's not even that bad, yeah, you can definitely main deck the Fuvolos. So going ahead when the January pack releases and getting 3 Fuvolos, I think is no big stretch. You can definitely go ahead and do this, craft 3 of this, and be pretty happy with them. Will you put them into every deck, main deck, 3 times automatically? I don't really think so, since in Master Duel we are still in a best of 1 format and not in a side deck format. These cards would be, and this is something that needs to be said, these cards would be way more impactful if we would not play best of 1. So I can definitely see a world in which a lot of decks will put triple Fuvolos in the main deck, but I definitely do not see a world where a lot of decks put triple Purulia in the main deck. So this is the first thing. I think Purulia, the release of Purulia, is definitely not as impactful for Master Duel as it was for the TCG and OCG. Same goes for the Fuvolos, but the Purulia is just not that strong that you will see a lot of play when it comes to this card. Still, I think it makes sense if you get a Purulia from your packs to keep the Purulia, to keep a playset of the Purulia, since there will be formats in which there are decks that are really weak against Purulia. So for example, if in the future we get the Ryziel cards, the Ryziel cards are definitely not that great into Purulia since they summon from the hand a lot. So this could be a nice counter actually. So having the Purulia is definitely nice, but the Fuvolos is kind of like a mandatory card. You definitely want this 3 times. There will probably be metas in which you don't include this in your main deck. I can definitely see this, and for everyone who is playing tournaments, playing best of 3 tournaments in any sense, maybe the Challenger Cup or Dkayed tournament or whatever, then it's obviously a no-brainer having 3 Mulcharmy Fuvalos as well as 3 Purulia. So if you're already scared of, oh god, I have to craft 6 cards, I don't really think that you will need to craft Purulia at the start of this card being released, if you don't play Tenpai, that is, but definitely the Fuvalos. So we will see this in Tenpai, but I think this also warrants some harder Tenpai hits. I have predicted in my prediction video that we will probably see the field spell going to 1, and I also said that I don't really see the Chandra going to 1, but now we could also see the Chandra as well as Second Summoning going to 1. Will this make a big difference? I don't really think so, unfortunately. This is needed, but this is not enough. In the end, we will have to need to get the Second Kaiman to 1, I think. I don't think that they will do everything at once, put everything to 1 at once. Would be nice to get the Chandra to 1, since then we get back 60 ultra crafting points that we can reinvest into the Fuvalos. That's quite nice. Or maybe the Purulia. So people don't really need to panic about Purulia, I think. And also Fuvalos is definitely, even though it could be bad for the game in the sense of Tenpai being the most dominant deck right now and then being even more dominant, in the long game, Mulcharmy Fuvalos is very great for Master Duel, and I can only hope that we see something happening to the Maxx C like we see in the OCG. I think we can definitely see this going to 2. I'm not really convinced that we will see Maxx C being forbidden. We might see as an experimentation, or maybe the OCG was the experimentation. Maybe this goes to 1 or something. That would be amazing, because I don't think that Maxx C is a very nice and healthy card. But the Fuvalos is. The Fuvalos is a really nice replacement for the Maxx C, and it might be the case that they wanted to test this out for Master Duel in the OCG, and maybe this is the best world, and then they also don't really need to hit Tenpai that hard if they just forbid the Maxx C and then give us Fuvalos times 3, and then probably Tenpai will play triple Purulia, triple Fuvalos until they will get destroyed by a further ban list, and then we will be fine. Then we will be in a very great environment where you then probably will play triple Fuvalos in any deck, since there is then no Maxx C anymore. This is then the new Maxx C, but a fair Maxx C, since you can't activate this when you have basically built a board, and the effect is also not that strong. This would be the greatest world that we could live in, so I'm really hopeful for the release of Mulcharmy Fuvalos. I think this is something that is good for the game in the long run, even if we might have to endure 1 month or something like this, or maybe 2 months if we are unlucky, of Tenpai being even more dominant and even more game breaking than it was before. But I also don't think that Konami will basically look at this for a long time, see the player base dwindle down, see their numbers dwindle down, and not do anything about this. Then we will probably see some devastating Tenpai hits, or we will see these Maxx C hits. So the next ban list that we will get, the next ban list announcement, is very interesting. I might want to say here that I might not be there for that, since I'm at the family, or at my family's now for Christmas, so I might not be able to react to this. But also looking at the other decks that are good right now, right? So the question is, in what kind of meta environment are we right now, and are Mulcharmy Purulia as well as Mulcharmy Fuvalos good against them? So one of the most important decks to talk about might be Voiceless Voice, right? Since Voiceless Voice is actually a deck that the Mulcharmy Fuvalos is not that great against, since summoning from the extra deck is not something that Voiceless Voice does, and they also do not really summon a lot from the deck. They actually only summon with the Sour Abyss as well as with the Trap, which you would only activate on your opponent's turn. The Mulcharmy Purulia is definitely something else, since the Purulia is actually quite nice against Voiceless Voice, because you will summon your rituals from hand, and then you want to normal summon your Law or maybe your Diviner of the Herald. So Purulia is actually nice against Voiceless Voice, where Fuvalos is very bad. So the other cool thing that could happen if we get these cards is that decks like Voiceless Voice, that are definitely popular and working great right now, but not that popular in comparison to Temper Dragon, can definitely see an upsurge in playability, since this deck is actually not that hindered by the Mulcharmy Fuvalos, which probably a lot of people will play this in the beginning of the game. Another important and very interesting thing is, will these have animations? I don't really think so, since just imagine if Maxx C, every time it is being played, would have an animation. I also think that they didn't want to give Ash Blossom a crazy animation, which is why they only gave her this little bonus animation, so that you do not see this big animation every time this card is used. For Maxx C, it would be a lot of animation time. So I don't really think that Konami wants to do this. This will change up the meta game even if we don't get the Fiendsmith stuff. Not in a good way at first, but then definitely in a good way in the long term, since some decks will be better and worse. So the Voices Voice, for example, being very nice into the Fuvalos, but not being that nice into the Purulia. Then Temper Dragon itself. So let's say you are playing a Temper Dragon and you're playing against Temper Dragon, and then your Temper Dragon opponent drops a Fuvalos and a Purulia on you. Is that bad for you? Definitely yes. You are summoning a lot from the hand. You're also summoning a lot from the deck and extra deck. So Fuvalos and Purulia at least are also good cards against Tenpai, giving you the ability to maybe stop them. But as I already said, you will not really play the Purulia in your main deck since it doesn't really make any sense, but probably the Fuvalos. Decks like Jubel, same thing here. The Purulia as well as the Fuvalos are quite nice. The Fuvalos obviously being the better one, with a lot of Jubels being summoned from the deck, and then a lot of extra deck linking and climbing that is being done here. So the Fuvalos will definitely stop the Jubel from playing. One thing that we have seen over in the OCG with the introduction of the Fuvalos and now also in the TCG is that the game definitely slows down a bit, since there are then multiple turns that need to be passed in order to get rid of these lingering effects of the Fuvaloses and the Purulias, which is definitely something that is nice for the game. Next deck being Mech, also something that summons from the deck and especially from the extra deck a lot, will slow down this deck quite considerably. So putting in 3 Fuvaloses in your main deck might make a lot of sense when the Purulia doesn't really make that much sense, as you can see right here when looking at the deck. Snake Eyes obviously once again summons a lot from the deck, a lot from the extra deck. Very, very impactful. And then we could also go further down here, but this trend continues. Labyrinth definitely being something or a deck that is not that hindered, like Voiceless Voice by the Purulia. Yes, they summon from the deck, but they don't summon from the extra deck at all if they don't need to. So they can, but they don't really need to. So they can also just play, for example, the simultaneous equation can and then call it a day. Don't really summon from the extra deck. Basically ditch this entire Unchained package that they are sometimes playing. So we might see an upsurgence of these decks like Labyrinth and then also Voices Voice that are good against Fuvalos. But we will have to see. The most important questions that need to be answered is whether the Maxx C will be hit on the Banlist, which would be amazing. Please go to 0, and whether we will get Fiendsmith, I think, since Fiendsmith would be able to basically overtake the Tenpai stuff, or at least be on the same level, so that we do not only see Tenpai Dragon running around with triple Purulia and then triple Fuvalos. I think another important or interesting question that we could ask ourselves is, what would we even put out of the Tenpai deck in order to put in the Fuvaloses and the Purulia, since we need 6 spots here. That's not that easy if you take a look at the deck list. So we, for example, do not really want to put out Shifters, we do not want to put out Engine, and we might need to put out Engine when, for example, the Sengen summoning goes to 1. So I think what we would put out here are the less impactful hand traps, never ever the Maxx C, never the Ash Blossom, since the Ash Blossom can also counter Fuvalos and Purulia, so Ash Blossom definitely stays forever. With Fuvalos and Purulia coming into the game, I will probably assume that a lot more people will play Double Called By and Crossout to deal with them. So these are also not leaving. And then you will see the less impactful hand traps leaving the deck, probably something like the Ghost Ogre or DD Crow, which you could definitely argue is a bad thing, because Mulcharmy Fuvalos and the Purulia do the same thing as Maxx C basically, and the other hand traps are more specific, right? This destroys, this negates, this like hinders something from the graveyard or banishment, this locks your hand, this removes something. And if we remove all of these diverse hand traps for basically more copies of Maxx C, this might not be that great, but we will have to see whether this is a trend that continues in the long run. But this is definitely a more dangerous point for us in a best of 1, since we don't have a side deck and we just need to include the strongest hand traps that we have, which are obviously Fuvalos, Purulias, and then in the future also the Dominus Impulse, which will also basically mean that that these other less impactful hand traps will probably leave a lot of main decks. So this is something to be concerned about with these cards in the future. But obviously all of this depends on whether we will see the Maxx C going, because if the Maxx C goes, then triple Fuvalos would basically just be a replacement for the Maxx C, and then, as I already said, Purulia will not be in the main deck most likely, and then we will have the same situation, just with a better outcome, since we don't have Maxx C anymore, but the fairer version of Maxx C. I'm really interested. This could definitely change up the game forever, how the game is being played. This can definitely get a lot of people back into the game that have left because of this Maxx C stuff, which is definitely annoying. I totally agree. Playing the TCG, I know how it feels to not play with Maxx C. I know how it feels to play with a best of 3 side deck. I'm also still wondering why we don't get a best of 3 in Master Duel. They could just put another ranked ladder in for best of 3 and then just keep the best of 1 ladder. They don't need to remove this, obviously, but I don't know. Maybe in the future we will get this, but now I'm very interested in your opinion on this whole Fuvalos and Purulia subject. What do you think will happen? Do you think this is a good development? Do you think this is a bad one? What do you think will happen to Maxx C? Will it go to 0? Will nothing happen to it, which honestly would be the worst? I think it's pretty safe to say that we will see something like Maxx C going to 2, like in the OCG. I don't really see this being forbidden. I just hope so. But this still being at 3 when these come out, I don't really see it. I don't think so. Konami also is aware that people aren't really happy with the 10 pi situation in Master Duel, so I think they will address this somehow. We might see big 10 pi hits giving us back Ultra Rares. We will see. Let me know in the comments what you think will happen, what you think should happen. I'm very interested, and we will see each other in the next one.